File item number 9. Cindy Messer is staff member responsible for this panel. DWR Delta Flood Emergency Facilities Improvement Project.
Up a little room here. All right. Good morning, council members. So yes, I'm going to go ahead and spearhead this presentation this morning and do some opening remarks right before I introduce my fellow speakers up here at the table. And I do want to quickly acknowledge Yu Chen Chow, who was the author of the staff report and put a lot of work into this. We decided after last month's council meeting and our big panels that maybe he would just sit behind me and jump up here just in the case I start to say something silly, but for space reasons. So just as a quick reminder, this is an action item on the agenda today. And as the chairman said, the focus of this presentation is on DWR's Delta Flood Emergency Facilities Improvement Project, which I will refer to as the project from here on out because it is a mouthful. As you recall, last October, our colleagues from the Department of Water Resources came and gave us a fairly detailed presentation on this project. And as you may also recall, the focus of the project was on identifying, evaluating, selecting, acquiring, and improving barge locations for flood fight materials at strategic locations within the Delta. And specifically, this project is focused in on 3 sites, 2 new storage sites, one on West Weber Avenue in Stockton, and a second site that's in Brannan Island State Recreation Area on Brannan Island. And then the project also focused in on modifying an existing storage site at Rio Vista. So I'm going to go ahead, when I let these gentlemen loose with their presentations, I'll let the DWR folks talk a little bit more about the details of the project. But I do have a couple other things I just want to mention. The project's budget is up to $40 million, and I'll talk a little bit more about the funding source and authority in just a second. And the requested action before you today is for your consideration of approving this particular project, and that's per some requirements out of Water Code Section 83002A1. And again, in just a few minutes, I'll kind of dive down into what that Water Code section says and what the requirements are and why it's here before the council today for your consideration of approval. But very quickly, I wanted to introduce my fellow speakers, and then I'll jump into some background information. So I have right here to my right, Mr. John Pash. He's the chief of the Regional Flood Preparedness Section at the Department of Water Resources. Next to him is Mr. Anthony Navasero, and he is the project engineer for the Regional Flood Preparedness Section, also with the Department of Water Resources. Directly to his right is Mr. Michael Cockrell. He's the Director of Emergency Operations for San Joaquin County's Office of Emergency Services. Make sure I got that right. And then at the end, we have Mr. Roger Ince, who is the Emergency Services Coordinator for Sacramento County's Office of Emergency Services. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for being here this morning, and we appreciate it. The gentlemen from DWR, again, are going to talk a little bit about the current status of the project. They're also here to help answer any questions the council may have regarding the project or the CEQA documents and the final outcome of those. And then the gentlemen from the local offices of emergency services are here to lend their support to the project and also to talk a little bit about how efforts such as this aid their work in the Delta region. So very quickly, a little bit of background information. We actually have had this type of action before the council previously, and it's been quite some time, I think January of 2012. I was looking at the date, it was about 3 days after I started with the council. We had a very similar action item before the council. So it's been a little while, so I thought I would set the stage for this. This project is authorized and funded through the Disaster Preparedness and Flood Prevention Bond Act of 2006, also known as Proposition 1E, which allocated funding, approximately about $3 billion, to the Department of Water Resources for flood risk reduction and included funding to reduce the risk of levee failure in the Delta. Subsequently, additional legislation in the form of SBX 2-1 allocated additional funding also to the Department of Water Resources in the amount of about $135 million for, quote, the acquisition, design, and construction of essential emergency preparedness supplies and projects, as well as stockpiling flood fight materials. Water Code Section 83002A1 contains details regarding the funding and funding allocations and the types of projects that would be awarded this type of funding. This Water Code section also contained some specific criteria regarding the projects that would receive this funding or be approved for the funding, and these included projects that protect and improve Delta water quality as well as drinking water. And the statutory language had some details regarding projects to reinforce sections of levees that have the highest potential to suffer breaches or failure and cause harm to both municipal and industrial water supplies. Lastly, Water Code Section 83002A requires that, quote, prior to the design or construction of any project funded pursuant to this paragraph, the California Bay Delta Authority or its successor shall approve the specific project or program. So clearly, as the successor to the CBDA, the Council is required to approve these projects or programs, and that's the purpose of bringing the item to the Council today. Specifically, I wanted to mention that the Council's approval is required to confirm the project's consistency with the criteria in Water Code Section 83002A1, to ensure technical adequacy of the project, and to ensure adequate CEQA compliance. And I'll add just a little bit more to this point. Because the Council has discretionary approval authority with regard to these projects, it is considered a responsible agency under CEQA, and it must review the documents, the projects and the CEQA documents accordingly, which the staff have done, and I will talk about that review and provide some recommendations to the Council right after we go ahead and run through the rest of the panel presentations today. I'd like to let these gentlemen fill in some more of the information for you. So I think we'll start with Mr.